Go ahead, please. No, by all means.
We're just talking about the next week. Yeah. That's good. They're welcome to drive slides. Oh, thank you. Okay, let's get started. Yeah. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. So we are starting our IAB Open meeting. If you're not here for IAB Open, you're absolutely welcome to stay. So this is a meeting that the IAB hosts to help highlight some of the active work that's going on, such as workshops and stuff we're talking about in programs and other things, but also to hear feedback and questions from this community and have an open dialogue here. So we really thank you for your participation here. I am Tommy Pauly. I am the IAB chair, and I'm joined by...
I'm Matthew Bocci. I'm another member of the IAB.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to the next slide. So this meeting is covered under the note well, as are all the meetings this week. So please do make sure you are familiar with this. This is how we participate within IETF meetings and describes also our code of conduct, which is very important. All right. So what is IAB Open? I mentioned a bit already, but this is a session where we get to talk about some of the technical and architectural topics that are prescient and current within the IETF community and that the IAB is looking at. We also get to talk about the relationships and liaisons we have to other standards organizations. We try to highlight different SDO relationships every time, and so we have a good talk on that this time as well. And part of this is to both increase the visibility of the work that the IAB does, as well as to get input and feedback from all of you. So beyond being present in this meeting, there are many different ways you can engage with the IAB if you have questions, comments, concerns, or anything else. So we have the IAB mailing list that you can send mail to directly. This includes all of the people listed here. It's not just the IAB members, but also the people who are regularly participating and part of our IAB meetings. You can also join and participate in the Architecture Discuss list. This is where we will highlight any documents that are going through the IAB stream, but we also have a lot of other different architectural discussions. And if you have questions related to liaisons, you can email the liaison coordination email alias, and this goes to the IAB members who are in charge of coordinating liaisons at the time. Okay, so our agenda today, we're just giving some of the status updates right now. We'll be hearing from Miria and Suresh on some of the work they are doing to update the RFCs that describe liaison relationships and liaison statements. We will hear a update from one of our liaison managers, Scott, on the liaison to ITUT. And then we'll talk about some of the workshops that are happening and have happened. We'll hear about the upcoming workshop, NEMOPS, on network management, both looking back and looking forward on that, as well as hearing a summary of the recent AI control workshop that occurred in September. And lastly, we'll have some updates from ISOC on the GDC, the Global Digital Compact, that was published recently, and we can have a discussion on that as well. And then as we have time, we can have an open mic at the end, and we encourage any and all questions. Fully open. This is IAB Open. I may regret saying that. So just going through some status updates, we have some IAB documents that are ongoing. We have RFC 9614, which was published back in July, which is a technical document on using partitioning as an architecture for privacy. This is looking at how technologies like MASC and Oblivious HTTP and Privacy Pass use splitting up of data for privacy. Please read it, comment on it. We also have a workshop report from the bias workshop, and actually one update, we now very recently do have a new workshop report for the AI control workshop that was just published yesterday. So didn't do that in time to update these slides, but we'll hear more about that later. All right, you want to cover this, Matthew?
Sure. So we just wanted to have a slide or two on just to highlight the IAB's role in shepherding new work in the IETF. And there's a couple of areas that we wanted to kind of highlight on this slide. The first is in the IAB's role in supporting BOFs. And that's through a number of things. First is that the IAB members can act as BOF shepherds and provide architectural and other guidance when requested by the IESG. So it's kind of just providing another point of view on the work or on what's going on with the BOF. We can cover a BOF, so that provides, and in doing so, IAB members can provide an evaluation report to the IESG and the IAB, and primarily it's to identify Annie, not Andy. I'm not sure who Andy is. But Andy might be involved as well. Any architectural concerns. And IAB members can also review BOF charters. It's usually done as kind of an individual contribution in this, and provide feedback to the IESG and to the BOF proponents. We've also started running a new work help desk. So we ran a new work help desk during IETF 120, giving people the opportunity to discuss developing new work in the IETF. And we're doing the same kind of experiment here after this meeting between 3 and 4:30. A bit more information on the next slide. But we're kind of interested to get some feedback as to whether the community finds this useful. We did have a few folks come up and talk to us at the help desk. We've had a little bit of follow-up since then. But is there, as well as this, is there anything else that the community would like the IAB to do to help shepherd new work? Can either mention now or maybe in the open at the open mic at the end.
Or email the IAB.
Or just email the IAB. Okay. All right. So what we're doing today is that we're offering the help desk again as an experiment to support people who want to bring new work into the IETF. And this is really around, they can bring questions or invite questions around the process, the tooling, and some technical discussion as far as possible, like where does this fit, where could it go, how to kind of socialize work as well within the IETF, which is quite an important thing for new work, and help get you connected to the right people. So the help desk will be in the registration area on the ground floor from 3 to 4:30 today, and just come by with any questions on new work. Or of course, as Tommy mentioned, you can alternatively send an email to iab@iab.org, or just chat to any individual IAB member that you find in the corridor.
Very good. We also have 2 technical programs that are ongoing within the IAB. One is e-impact, and this is kind of one of the starting points for both what we have now chartered as the Green Working Group, as well as the proposed Sustain Research Group. Do you want to highlight anything specifically here, Suresh? I'll let you talk to it if you want.
So nothing specific on this, like, but we did have a meeting last time. We didn't meet this time because there's like 2 other activities happening, but like we would again try to go for another interim meeting. I think the interim meeting stuff works pretty well. And I think Yari and I will like go for interim stuff going forward.
Got it. Thank you. All right. Just on the next slide. We also have the EDM technical program. So this is evolvability, deployability, maintainability. It's produced a couple documents. It's not meeting this time, partly just due to having a very full schedule, but we do plan to hold a virtual interim call afterwards. The one work item that's still remaining in there is developing a document where we're talking about kind of overall guidance on techniques like greasing. And this is something that is not yet adopted onto the IAB stream, but we would be looking to do. Okay, so now we're ready to jump into our agenda. So first up, we will be talking about the liaison RFC updates. Miria and Suresh.
So we, and I mean, actually the IAB is planning to update these 2 documents, RFC 40, 52 and 53. They are about handling liaison statements and also how we handle our liaison relationships or guidelines for liaison managers. We can go to the next slide, I think. So why are we doing this? Because these documents are 20 years old. They are not kind of up to date with what we're actually doing. And also we get a lot of questions from people, and we try to, when we try to point them to the document where this is written down, it's not always as clear as it should be. So we're trying to really improve the situation here, make things clearer, answering some of these questions, which are somewhere answered in these documents, but like maybe not as clear as they should be. And again, time passes by, so we have also adapted our process a little bit. So it's really bringing the stuff up to date. And maybe especially on 4053, that has a whole specification about tooling in there, which just shouldn't be in an RFC, never, ever. So we definitely remove that, and we will move it a little bit to a higher layer about guidance and what are the requirements, what do you get out of a liaison, what's the purpose, and why are we doing this at all? You want to add something?
Yeah, another thing is like kind of clarify when we set up a formal liaison relationship, right? Like, so we kind of get like a lot of requests coming in, and we kind of been handling it one at a time. So the IAB kind of gets involved to do it. But I think it'll be good to kind of put some kind of checklist into this document saying like, when is like a formal liaison relationship the right thing to do, right? Like at least like some kind of pre-filtering criteria. So that's something we want to add in when we get community feedback on it, because I think it's like a big thing to update. So we would put it up to the community. So there's like stuff at the end. We talk about like how we plan to go about updating it. But the initial idea is like we kind of have a GitHub. We want to have a 0.0 draft before we bring anything to the community, but it's not adopted. And a weird thing about this is an IAB produced BCP. And if you are into the inside baseball kind of thing for this, IAB is not allowed to produce BCPs. IAB only produces informational documents. So the document, how it does is it goes through IAB process fully, becomes adopted by the IAB and approved by it, and then it goes to AD sponsor it and bring it along on the IETF stream as a BCP document, right? So we kind of have to go through this process in both the directions. We kind of want to have the community feedback before we go through all that.
Yeah, it's not only that we want the community feedback. I mean, like we will get it in the last call, but we really need it earlier on. We don't want anybody to be surprised about this. We want to make sure we get input from the right experts in the community early on in the process. We want to make sure everybody's aware that we're doing this and this is coming up. And of course, we want to make sure that people also understand what's in the documents at the end, which means like having people involved in the process, but also when we publish the documents, we have to do more in order to educate and train people about this. So this is really our goal here. That's what we want to achieve. Next slide. Yeah, what we've done so far, we are at the very end. You didn't miss anything. We really just started. And the first thing you do is, of course, you start at GitHub. And we did start some issues, but there's zero discussion on the issues. So this is just what we think we want to change in the documents. And in this case, I mean, actually, the two of us here. So we definitely want more input. We might be completely wrong about these things. You can comment on the issue. You can open new issues. Or you can also wait for the 0.0 version and then have more discussion. It's not too late at that point. But we have these GitHub issues. You feel free to look at them. Feel free to comment if you want to be engaged. On the 53 document, really the first point I mentioned already, we remove all this tooling stuff. I already have a PR for that as well. So that's a big change, which is like also on the PR hard to follow. So I hope the 0.0 version will actually be more clear. We want to actually change some of the content because there's a little bit of a strange language that sounds like as if we have to reply to every single liaison statement we get, which also doesn't make sense because sometimes they are for information or whatever. So we want to clarify the language in there and get a better understanding in the community about this. Some of the details are just like specified too detailedly. Nobody else understands them in the documents. Hopefully we can change that. And I think one important part for me is point 4 here also, it's what the document doesn't say at the moment is like one of the valuable things you get about sending as a liaison statement is a public record of having this sent. And that is a value in itself, and the document doesn't talk about it. So I want to address that part.
Next slide, please. So, and I think like, so the higher level document, which is 4052, also talks about like creating and like transmission of liaison statements. It needs to go, probably it's like a higher level document. And there's like IETF, like, you know, our unstated policy really, right, at this point is like, hey, we prefer like people to have common attendance in both the orgs and kind of bring it like to the regular process. And just because something comes in a liaison statement doesn't give it additional weightage in the IETF process, right? Other than saying that the other body has some official standing on this, right? But if you look at the IETF working group process, like we're not going to adopt a draft because we got a liaison statement, or like, you know, we're not going to take somebody's feedback more because it came from a liaison manager, right? Like, so we treat it as like any other input. That's something that needs to do it. And as I talked about earlier, is the checklist for the creation of relationships, because a lot of the times people misunderstand, right? Like the need for a liaison relationship. I think it's there somewhere. So part of it is like people say like, hey, I want to send you a liaison statement. So we need a relationship. And that's not necessary, right? Somebody can send us a liaison statement without having a liaison relationship formally. And Cindy always takes care of it. Like but I think the point is really to kind of clarify why we need a formal liaison relationship from the side.
Or when you need it.
When you need it, yeah. Next slide. So do you want me to go through this, Miriam?
Whatever.
Sure. So I think the idea is to kind of like get a wider understanding that this is getting done. So the IAB Open is the first step. So we were kind of like, it's just me, Miria, Dhruv, Chin, and Wes, like from the IAB, who've been kind of doing this IAB, and Tommy as well, kind of had these discussions before, but we want to bring it before the bigger community and collect more issues. I'm sure we heard quite a bit. So we had this liaison coordinator office hours in the past few meetings. So we heard like, I think like Arno was here, like, you know, there's a few people here in this room who've been to those things and brought up issues. The goal is to collect the issues first and kind of get our position as a community on like how we want to handle it. Like some of the things that are kind of come up before is the timelines. So the way the other orgs work, maybe it's the leadership is authorized to speak for the organization, but here we are not, right? Like when we get a liaison statement here and it says like, hey, tell us what is your official position, we go and check with the working groups and it takes some time, right? So that kind of timeline, like we kind of need to talk about it, like, you know, what kind of lead time do we need and stuff. So those are probably stuff we want to collect. And
And so basically, it depends. So we're in this initial phase and we're trying to publish a 0.0 version very quickly, hopefully, because that will give you a much better idea about what the changes look like, at least the initial changes we're planning. But then we will try to figure out what's the right process to involve the community. So if we get like a huge amount of feedback, maybe we have to establish some structure around this to have a discussion. Or if we get like very specific feedback from some experts, we can have maybe a different way to involve them. So it all depends on what happens right now, and then we will decide how we create the process to make sure we involve the right people, we get good community feedback, and then yeah, the goal at the end is of course to publish the RFC. But like we have to see what happens right now in order to decide like how we run the process. I think that's the last slide, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So any questions?
Andrew?
Hi, Andrew Campling speaking. Just an observation, really, to sort of play devil's advocate a bit. You've rightly phrased some of the things such as liaisons have no special role in our processes. I think we need to reflect that we can't expect all the other SDOs to conform with our processes.
100%.
We have to adapt to them as well. So just as an observation, this comes across maybe not intentionally as everyone needs to fit in with us. And I think there are consequences to that, which I think I touched on in the next presentation. If zero response to a statement from the ITU is interpreted as agreement, we might not be comfortable with that, but that's their process. So I think we probably need to do some work on how we can adapt to fit with others, not just expect them to fit with us.
100%. And I think it's a really good point, Andrew. I think we need to work on the wording for that. But this is a fact, right? Like, so we need to kind of somehow make it clear that like something coming in through a liaison statement is treated equally, like to something that if a common participant put it on the working group mailing list, right? So I understand it's very hard to put in, but we need to kind of clarify this, right? Like somehow, but I totally get your point about like not getting a response, but I think that is part of the other issue that Miria was talking about, right? So the response may or may not be a liaison statement. I think we want to clarify that, but the idea is the liaison manager has to like close the loop on that one, right? Saying like, hey, we got this thing, either there's no action for us or like, this is not, like, I think like Scott is probably the best example of this because he gets like a fire hose full of liaisons coming in, right? And he kind of handles it, like, to make sure that everything is closed. But a lot of the things that come to in are not relevant to the IETF at all, right? So I think like, I totally get your point, and we need to be very particular about like, we don't look like we're ignoring things. I totally get that point. I would love some suggestions on the text, for the both the documents actually.
But I want to say the reason why we have this whole system is because we try to engage with the other organizations, right? But we also have to make it fit to our own setting and processes. But then like a lot of the confusion is about these questions about how does this engagement with like one specific organization actually works, because it's always a different answer depending on which organization you talk to, because they all have a different system. So like what we can write down and document is like this kind of high-level common set of rules, but then all the details we have to figure out on the basis between two organizations, I think, and that makes it complicated.
Lars.
Hi, Lars Limanetno. Just do you have a gut feeling for any timeframes here for the documents? Years, months, hours?
Months. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think the bigger issue is going to be like, where our community stands. We don't have a good read of that because it's 20 years ago, right? Like, things were like very different then. So like some of the things, we don't have a good idea of like where the community stands, because like, I think in the IAB, even on the IAB, we had discussions like with like slightly different views. So I think in the community, we need to understand, like, I think like Andrew's point is one thing, right? Like, when we have a impedance mismatch with the other SDO, right? Like, do we say like, hey, this is what we are, like, take it as is, right? Like, or not, right? Because 3GPP says like, hey, like, send us like a Word document in a zip file, right? If you want to send us a liaison, like, should the IETF say something like that? Like, even like me and Miria don't agree on this thing, right? So should we say like, send us a text file, 72 columns, like ASCII text only, right? Is that an acceptable thing, right? So those kind of things we do need to talk about, like, we don't have a clear understanding of where the community is going to fall on that. So the thing is going to document community consensus, and we don't have a really good idea of like how long this is going to drag on. But at least on our part, we want to get that done quickly if possible.
Yep, but Thank you. I just wondered if I needed to slot it in next week, but
No, no.
No.
So let's say a year, right? But we want to we want to move. We really want to move fast because, like as I said, we want to have the high level things. So hopefully we don't have to like agree on all the little nitty details in the document. So and also this is from my head. This is the first step in order to then have more communicate, like educate people, train people, have like more activities in the community. And if we can't get this done fast, then we have to like change our plans because that's only first step of what we want to do here.
thank you.
All right. And Jim? And we'll move on.
Jim Reid, RTFM LLP. One of the concerns I have is there are large numbers of inbound liaison statements that have had no response from the IETF at all. And some of these have been festering for years and years and years. And I wonder if there's any plans to try and deal with that in a much more constructive way, because from the outside, it looks really, really bad. The IETF is not engaging with other SDOs, and it also looks as if the IETF doesn't care, which may be a reasonable assumption to make in many cases. But I do think something needs to be done there. Either it's just to say that we're never going to respond to this document, but the idea is they've been left dangling like that can sometimes give the misleading impressions the IETF will at some point, maybe in the future, respond to this document, when in fact there will be nothing happening from our side. So I think it would be helpful as a better way of handling those kind of situations, although I don't know what the answer is. That's
Right.
why you get the big bucks.
Yeah, I got your point, Jim, right? And it totally makes sense. Like, so the thing is, like, a lot of the times it's not even clear that we want to send a response, right? But I think like one of the things we could do, like just throwing this out, right? Like, so as a suggestion is that we mechanically respond to everything saying, hey, your liaison has been received, like, thank you for sending it. It has been recorded as this thing. And if you specify there's some action required, like you'll get another ping back from us or whatever, but like a lot of them are just notifications to us, right? Like we don't like mechanically respond to something that's a notification to us. Maybe that's something the community wants to always send a response saying, hey, we received your liaison and it's recorded at datatracker.itf.org/liaison/4673. And that's it, right? At least like that gets away the opinion about like us ignoring them. But a lot of the things we get are completely irrelevant to us. So I don't know how to kind of draw the balance there, because like somebody needs to tell them. So I think the job falls on the liaison manager. And as I said, like, you know, we have people on the other side who are looking at it and trying to like filter this down. But sometimes we do get stuff that's completely irrelevant to us, right? Like I think that's the part like where the community needs to kind of guide us a little bit better.
Yeah,
What do we do with this?
I think it's a little bit unfair to place all the burden here on the liaison manager. I specifically thinking about the context of things that happen inside ITUT. There's a perception inside ITUT that because there's a large number of documents coming from all these crazy study groups doing all sorts of crazy things that don't get a response from the IETF, the perception is the IETF doesn't care about us, we don't need to pay attention to them, and that makes it difficult for the people inside ITUT that's trying to fight the good fight there. And it's no disrespect at all to what Scott's doing. Scott's doing an amazing job, and we're lucky to have him serving in that ITUT liaison role for us. It's no reflection on him at all, but sometimes it'd be much helpful if there's a much more robust response coming out of the ITF. Sorry, ITF, thanks.
Yeah, so I mean, in a single case where you think this is really important, you can talk to us and flag this to us, right?
Sure.
But in the general case, I think we also make sure, and it's unfortunately on the liaison manager, that they also understand our processes and that they understand what it actually means if we're applying or
So-
not.
Well, the fact of the
So
matter is
just-
sorry, Tommy.
Yeah, just for time's sake, I want to be able to move on to Scott's talk on ITU stuff. And I will point out for further discussion on this, because I think there's a good dialogue to have. Tomorrow lunchtime is the liaison coordinator office hours. I know we've discussed this before. I agree with you about the points you're making. Let's continue that discussion. Let's continue emailing.
Okay.
I think this is both RFCs as well as just the general topics we're discussing. I think it is a ripe time to relook at what we're doing here.
Okay.
Actually, I want to say one more quick thing.
Yeah.
So we also want to fix the tooling, just in case somebody is wondering, but that's a longer timeline.
Okay. Scott, please come up.
Thank you very much. How long do I have? 10 minutes?
Okay.
All right, that's fine. I will not go through every one of these slides. There's like 18 or 19 slides or whatever. So let me just give you a quick overview of what's going on with the ITUT. I'm Scott Mansfield. I am affiliated with Ericsson. and I serve as the IETF's ITUT liaison coordinator, along with a couple of others that help out in other study groups, like Deborah Brungard for Study Group 15. Now we have the chair of Study Group 17 in the room, I believe, so Arnaud Tadai will help us out there too. So we do have some more people that are IETF literate that go to the ITU, which does help. Do I have is that thing I use?
Probably that's
Or-
fine.
Okay, then I'll do this. So what I wanted to show is why does this matter? So when I talk about the ITU, I always talk about it being an international treaty standardization organization. Top-down messaging is very important to this organization. Political and technical monitoring is needed. So the thing that I look at my role and other roles in this organization is I look for what I call technology diplomats. I look for people that can understand the policy end of things, the regulatory end of things, how things look to member states or governments, and also how the bottom-up technology community has to react to the things that are going on in this space. There is not one space that does everything, so we need to have good coordination among the various standards bodies so that we have the entire ecosystem covered. Next slide, please. So I have all, oh, it does work? Okay. All right. So again, like I said, I only have a couple minutes, so I'm not going to go over all of this. There's a few highlights here that I wanted to show. So if you're interested in the structure of the ITU, you'll see that in here. If you're interested in how study groups look, that's in here. If you're to draw a analogy, like a study group is the same thing as an area in the IETF. And then there's WTSA. There was a big meeting. WTSA, what does that mean? That's the group, that's the meeting that happens every 4 years to set the agenda for the ITUT, the T sector in particular. There are similar meetings for the D sector, which is the development sector, and the R sector is the radio sector for spectrum issues. And there's also the plenipotentiary meeting that sets the agenda for all of those three sectors. So why does that matter? Well, you'll see, because WTSA is where the new leadership is set. So I won't, like I say, I won't go over all this. So that's the structure. You can read that on your own. These are the elected officials. These officials are elected at plenipotentiary meeting. The ITUT is structured like this. So it's very much like just a very hierarchical business kind of structure. There's a steering group, there's study groups, there's working parties and questions. A question is like a working group here. And there are now 11, 10, 11, I don't know, some number of questions or study groups. There's a new one that is a combination of two. They collapsed one. But the ones that matter mostly to the IETF, I think, are study group 15, which is the network technology. That's a transport, not this transport, but the plumbing layer. There is study group 12, which is a performance and quality assurance, quality of service type of group. And then study group 17 is security. And so all the people, I listed down all of the new study group chairs. You'll notice that the study group chair, study group 2 is from the USA. She's going to do a fantastic job in that one. And there's naming and numbering issues in there. So that's a very important one from an IETF standpoint as well, especially if you're looking at the new ways that things like metaverse and other are being addressed. So you can read that one tomorrow. This is something that I put together just to show this thing keeps coming out, keeps coming in, and how many people are going and where the influence lies. So this is a study group 15 meeting from last year. And this is a study group 11 meeting. You can see there's a lot of influence from what is in here known as East. So that's that's China and allies associated with that. There is India, there's West North America. I'm not wild about the way this is divided up, but we can get into a geopolitical argument later, so we can talk about that as offline. So WTSA was the meeting that just happened a couple weeks, last 2 weeks ago, I think. And the important thing is that this is the group where all those leaders were elected, and there is a set of draft proceedings, and there have been some resolutions that have been created and updated. So the ones I put down here, the ones that I think if you're an IETF person that is interested in what the international crowd is thinking about these topics, I would look at these resolutions. There's one on cybersecurity, the evolving role of industry. That was one that I think that Arno did a fantastic job on. That's about industry engagement, making the work of the ITU relevant to industry, but also making industry relevant to the work of the ITU. So anything we can do that helps build the bottom-up story associated with the ITU helps the IETF, in my opinion, because the IETF is the center of competence in many things that are basis for the ITU work. And then there was an open source resolution that was updated, but there's a couple of new ones. And the one I forgot to put on here is one on metaverse. There is a metaverse resolution along with an AI resolution and one on non-terrestrial networks. I know that's something that may matter to the people here. So some of the mandates, I just listed down this is not everything that these study groups do. Obviously, I just took out the things that I thought meant the most to the IETF. And so identity management and identification related to IoT. Obviously, we care about that at the IETF. And then there's the energy efficiency. There is quality of service. Study group 13 is one that is very high level, way up here, but they're trying to build things related to architectures and frameworks around quantum computer, post-quantum computation. Something that I think that I keep reminding them about is the work on the ability to have quantum resistant security. So this is where the liaison manager helps to explain what's going on in other bodies so that we can avoid duplicate work. That's one of the roles that's played. And then study group 15, study group 17, lots in study group 17 simply because it's all about security. And then study group 20, 21 is multimedia technologies. There is an advisory group. And this is the group that I participate in this, and most of the study group chairs participate in the steering group. Very important from a working method standpoint. We try to do gap analysis to make sure that the work that they're starting doesn't conflict, because we don't, the IETF or any other standards body that they liaise with, do not get information about their new work until the new work has started. And once it's started, it's too late, right, to really influence. So the next plenary meeting, I just put a list of some of their meetings in here. And then from a coordination standpoint, one thing that we've tried to do in between the IETF, the IEEE, and the ITUT is work in common areas to do coordination on various things. So we have coordination on data modeling, we have coordination around Yang, we have coordination where we pull together some work that's going on now in the Linux Foundation. So there is some of that type of work that we're trying to progress because we find, just like has been said before, we find that working together is better than throwing paper at one another, because when the ITU throws a piece of paper, it has been vetted by governments. There has been consensus written from the entire study group that this is a liaison to send. That is not the case when a liaison comes back from the IETF, and that is not how the IETF interprets the information from the ITU either. So that's one of the things that the technology diplomats have to worry about putting together and getting people to understand the way of working on both sides. So there's a couple of matters of coordination that I think we can really work on. These are technical issues. One is Yang at scale. We're finding that there's some scalability issues with the way Yang is done. And then we have success in a time synchronization that's across many different standards bodies with the ITU and IEEE and others. And then so we talked about this one. I know I'm probably out of time by now, but the liaison, formal communication, there are some issues. We've addressed this issue of silence seen as consent, because The way that you do work best in both organizations is you have people that go to both organizations that can explain what's going on over here, go over here and explain what's going on. And so even though you see that there's a lot in the tooling, there's a lot of liaisons that have not been responded to. The people on the ITU side know that they're not responded to because I tell them why they're not responded to, right? And so the issue that we have may be a bit with the tooling so that we can mark that, yeah, they know, that kind of thing. But anyway, I don't want to get into the tooling because you're right. The tooling doesn't belong in the in there. So, and then anybody that goes to the ITU, anyone that's interested in any of this stuff that monitors the ITU, it's free to monitor, right? So then I like to build a tree of people that watch out for things. Like Jim Reed is an excellent example. Mark McFadden is an excellent example. We've got others that send me emails. They're going, look at this thing going on. This is a problem, right? And that type of early warning system is what is really needed so that we can react in an efficient way. And so there's just several liaisons, work started. I talked about that. The table. Oh, I didn't put the table in. I left the table out because it made the conversation, made it too long. So you can go to the table. Anyway, so the thing that we try to impress upon the liaison managers that I know, try to impress upon the ITU, the IEEE, other engagement bodies is focus on the industry recognized center of competence. If you're going to talk about IP, if you're going to talk about IPv6, if you're going to talk about securing IP, if you're going to talk about routing, come to the IETF. This is the place to do the work. If you want to build a framework, an architecture, a test spec, whatever, fine, right? But don't modify anything about that. Come to us at the IETF. Work with us in our process. That's the other thing liaison managers do is explain how the process works, right? And then we also look for ways of finding early identification of overlap. So that's something that I talked about as well. And then we want to avoid conflicts because as soon as you start sending liaisons, if the IETF has to send a liaison back to the ITU, I think we've reached a failure because we are now in the process of documenting something where the IETF is saying, stop doing that. Because that's what a lot of our liaisons going back to the ITU seem to end up being. It's like, we're not like, oh, we agree, you should go ahead and do that. It's mostly, no, stop, we're doing that here. Come here and do it. And I think is that the last one? I think that's the last one. It's not going anymore. So,
That's how you know you're at the end.
that's
So
right.
we have two people
Thank
in queue, Suresh and Jim.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, Scott, thank you very much. Like, you, as I said, like,
I
you
can't
have
hear you in there.
Hello?
That's better.
Okay. Thank you very much for everything you're doing, Scott. This is like a tough liaison manager position to be in, and thank you for doing that. And I had another comment, like you had this Yang scale thing. So the IAB is actually organizing a workshop. It's called NEMOPS. And we would love to see like a position paper for that, like, talk to Wes or like Dhruv for like more info. But if something that can be packaged up into some kind of position paper, like whatever, we'd love for those people to come. It's a virtual workshop, so it'll be cool if somebody can participate.
I have what we need to build that presentation. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Jim.
Jim Reed, making trouble yet again. Scott, all I want to see at this stage is you're doing an amazing job in this role. I'm very, very, very lucky to have you doing that. So I want to think everyone deserves to thank you for all this hard work you're doing. And whatever you're being paid for this work, it's not enough.
I agree. He'll double my salary.
Yep.
Right. Thanks. Anything? And I'm here until Friday morning. I have to leave Friday. Oh,
We have
one more?
Andrew and
Oh,
Arno.
Andrew. Okay, great. Thanks.
Sorry, a bit slow getting up. Andrew Campling. Yeah, great presentation, really informative. I must admit, I thought your table on that missing table was an attempt at satire, or some other commentary. But just a question for which I have no answer other than I think the IAB should think about this is, I think our model makes it uniquely difficult for another SDO to bring things to us because our structure, they can only come as individuals. That seems to be problematic because if let's pick on the ITU as Scott stood there, if the ITU wants to bring something to us, it kind of can't because we don't work that way. And I think that's something that maybe the IAB should ponder on in its wisdom, find a smarter way of letting other STOs engage with us properly as grown-ups rather than just setting someone to take their chances in a working group somehow.
Oh, I have opinions on that, but we don't have time for it.
Good feedback. Good feedback. Arno.
All right, so Arnaud Tadei, I will speak as SG17 chair. So I think, so Scott, thank you very much for this presentation. It was fantastic. I just would like to insist on one point that I think liaison is first of all a matter of people. And the first thing I really appreciated was that Roman accepted my invitation to GSS and WTSA. I think it's really important that the chair of IETF could experience that. That's very unique and special if you don't understand. That's diametrically opposed to how IETF operates. So I think it was very good. The last thing I would like to say, and I know Mark is, yes, and Roman spoke at the GSS. I was very happy to make this happen. We were in the same hotel, so we could see each other sometimes. The third thing I want to say is that for people in the IETF, they have a specific perception of the ITU. The point is that the ITU is changing a lot. This WTSA, apart from hardcore United Nations votes that a few of us suffered because not only I'm the Study Group 17 chair, but Mike is the Study Group 17 vice chair. When we got pointed out that all US, UK, EU candidates were put on a hostage list as well as Russian Federation for a hardcore vote, like it's like the Pope, you have to close the doors, you have to get a formal
There's white smoke
and everything, the white smoke and everything. That was, then you wonder in which movie you are. But apart from that,
it was a conclave.
Yeah, it was a conclave. Apart from that, the meeting went remarkably well. And in fact, we are all surprised by how much agreement we had, because there are many other resolutions. And I was chairing the committee 3B, where I had to find consensus on 9 resolutions, including next generation and gender, and a new strategic plan. So there were a lot of good things that happened. So point is that the ITU is changing a lot. There are plenty of recommendations that are not crap, that are coming from real companies on real technical work, on real architects, on real production, on real code behind it. So I think there is a need to change a little bit the perception. And the last thing I would like to say on Study Group 17 is give me a bit of time. Mark is here and Mike is here. They know that I need to fix a number of things before I can get the coordination correct. And that's only my third pillar. I have 2 other priorities to fix. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's that type of effort that it takes to bring the communities together. So I appreciate Arnaud's efforts and the work of the other vice chairs of that particular group. So thank you.
All right, thank you. We have one more in queue, Mike. Yeah,
Oh, Mike, okay.
We'll just take that while we're transitioning over.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll just go quickly.
Hey, sorry, Mike Rosa, NSA. I just wanted to stand up and say hi. Arno mentioned that I was one of the vice chairs going into this next study period for SG17, so happy to help wherever I can when it comes to coordinating and liaisons from that perspective. So thanks.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
It sounds like people on that mic are quiet, so when you're up there, please speak up.
Yes, and thanks, Suresh. So it makes my job a little bit easier. So I have a quick update on the workshop that we are planning next, the next era of network management operations. Thanks for all the folks who are in the program committee from the IAB as well as from the community as well. A look back, our aim was that we did a workshop in 2002, much before my time. It was pretty good to read the work we did back then, but it's been time to have another look. And that's why we are organizing a new workshop, looking at what were the recommendations we made back then, what worked well, what didn't work well, and how's the future going to look like in the network management space. The objective that we put out was, yes, let's review, let's have a time check on what has happened. But at the same time, look in the future, what are the new requirements, future network management techniques, and have some suggestions among the workshop folks that what could be the next step that the IETF or IRTF can take in this space. You can still participate. You can submit a position paper. That would be the ideal. If you have, for some reason, don't want to submit a position paper, you can still give us an expression of interest, write us an email to the PC saying, why do you think you want to participate in the workshop, what inputs you can provide. That would be really nice. We have an operator survey, which is ongoing for folks who cannot make it to the workshop, but still want to provide us inputs. So this is the QR code for the survey. The link is also there. All the material is available on our data tracker as well. So please give us feedback and also talk to the PC if you have any suggestions on what this workshop should tackle, what are the key questions. We are looking for feedback on this. Here are a few dates for you. So our submission closes 1 week. So you have a week after the IETF where you can still submit things. Survey response can also be submitted. And the workshop dates is in the first week of December. It's an online workshop, so hopefully easier for folks to participate as well. And let's hope to have another good workshop from our side. One thing that we tried was reaching out to where the operators are. So lots of folks from our PC went to LACNIC, LACNOG, NANOG, RIPE, looking for more feedback, publishing the survey responses, getting breakout sessions with the operators, and getting that feedback going. Our plan is to continue that even after the workshop. So I'm planning to go to Apricot and APNEC and continue the conversation on what happened at the workshop. And hopefully we can build on this workshop to get more work done in the future direction for network management. Any questions? Thank you. Please give us feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. All right, so that was looking at our upcoming workshop. Now we're going to have a look back at our most recent workshop.
Like I'm here with Mark.
Hi, Mark.
I think Mark has just stepped out for a second. I didn't think he expected Drew to finish so quickly, but Drew should have talked about more stuff, like how good Yang is and how it scales, but yeah, that's fine. As like Tommy said, like, so this is a workshop we had in September. So this is done on a really, really tight timeline. So we started kind of doing this in the July IETF. Like we talked about like how we go about it. We got a short deadline for like the papers. So it's like probably like slightly more than a month or so. And we had this huge response, like from, we got like, I think like close to 40 papers, like the submissions that came in. And so we had a fantastic PC as well. And it was a physical meeting. So that's something we'll talk about in a bit. I think if you can go to the next slide, which we'll probably skip over, but it's like something we wanted to keep. So I'm not going to go through this because it's, you know why I don't want to go through this, right? But this is something we kind of want to put on the record, like, you know, what is the kind of thing that we wanted to look at in this workshop. But I kind of boiled it down to the next step, which is the questions that we wanted to address at the workshop. So like the PC and the chairs, we sat down together and tried to come up with a list of questions we were trying to attempt to answer in the workshop. Next slide. So, so first thing is like we wanted to look at like what is the success criteria for AI control? Like are we meeting the needs of the content creators, the platforms that host the content, the regulators who want to like, you know, make sure these things are done? Are we looking at the civic society's points of like view, like where like is it good for society kind of thing? So we kind of wanted to set down the set of success criteria for that, and also talk about like what preferences need to get expressed. So is this like something that needs to be granular, not granular? Is it like just the whole site, or like there's like specific usages and preferences associated to single objects? And is there preferences for use by somebody? So somebody could say like, hey, I have this content. I don't mind Google search getting it, but I don't want Google Gemini to use it for training, right? Like, so there's like levels of granularity that like we needed to get expressed for each of the content. And And we also talked about like whether this should be opt-out, opt-in, right? Like, and the governments are kind of doing stuff, right? So the EU, the TDM stuff is like really opt-out. So the idea is like, you kind of have to say like, hey, I don't want this to be used for training AI models. And also just blocking, like, the robots of text can just say like, hey, like, I don't want you to come in, right? Like, and that's another way of doing this. And also specifically, I think like Sarah talked about it yesterday, we had the policy roundtable, and the idea is like really, where does the technical thing stop and the policy and the legal thing start, right? So that we had like a mix of people in the meeting. I think like we can go to the next slide where we talk about it, but we had a really good mix of people who are like not just technical people, not just like policy people, not just like legal staff, but like more than that. Right? So we had a really good group of people to talk about, and now I hand it off to Mark, who's managed to get his copy.
That last presentation was awful quick, wasn't it? You're doing a fine job. Yeah. So where are we at?
Just finish the slide. Next slide.
Okay, next slide, please.
The clicker works too.
Right. So we had broad participation, and that was really key. We wanted to make sure that we had a good selection of folks in the room from a lot of different perspectives. Having a bunch of IETF old timers sitting in a room talking about what they thought about the world is of very little value. I'm sorry to shock you all. And so we had AI vendors, we had large publishers there, representatives or folks from various different governments, some civil society folks, a lot of legal experts. I was personally very happy to meet one of my, I'm a bit of a fanboy of one of the people who showed up because he's a legal expert in a particular field. We had a very focused discussion. We discovered very early on that there are some fundamental issues in this area where some people feel that any constraint of this is a bit of hyperbole, but one end of the spectrum, any constraint of AI is a constraint of innovation, and therefore you're going to constrain the future of the internet and constrain competition with other countries who don't have those constraints. Whereas the other end of the spectrum, you are stealing content, and therefore you are hurting businesses and killing those businesses, and therefore you're hurting journalism, and therefore you are hurting democracy. You can't really reconcile those positions in a 2-day workshop run by the IAB, unfortunately. And so we did not try to do that. We tried to focus on, and really speaking to the quality of people in the room and the quality of the conversation that we had, I think people realized that pretty quickly. But we came to a quick agreement, or at least some commonality in the room, that there is a problem that we could address, which is communication of the preferences of the content owners to the folks doing the crawling and the AI inference, and we realized that situation is a mess, and some standardization could actually help there. And so yeah, next slide, I think. And so the outcomes we discussed, if we could focus on a framework for expressing those preferences and then talk about what that world might look like, how to attach those preferences to different kinds of content where it's IETF controlled when it's in scope for us, and talking about having a simple common vocabulary to do so. We felt that those were very achievable things and actually could be done fairly quickly, and I won't say easily because then I would curse myself. But we can't, we decided it wasn't interesting to try and address things like authenticating or authorizing the crawlers or the AI engines or the content owners, or having some audit and transparency mechanisms or registries. These are all things that are interesting for various reasons, and maybe they would be on a future agenda, but they're not places where we felt we could make any immediate progress. Next slide. So just some kind of high-level observations from the perspective of running a workshop like this. The feedback we got from participants was pretty positive. People felt like we had a really nice combination of not only people in the room, but how we went about the conversation. One of the words that was used was it was very welcoming to people who weren't used to the IETF process and our way of working. We got some pretty strong feedback that for some people, they could not have participated if this were not an in-person event, or if it had not been Chatham House rule, that having ways of engaging that felt safe for them was hugely important to get that participation. And so for me, that's really interesting, because obviously we can't do our work all of our work in that mode, but having different modes of engaging to start the work and to get that initial input is something we need to think more carefully about as a community, I think. And yeah, again, and that seems like a positive model overall, holding this kind of workshop, going out and finding, the right venue and the right modality to have that initial conversation is a good way to start policy work. We very intentionally held this workshop in Washington, D.C. so that we can engage some people who otherwise would not come. And I think that's important, rather than expecting those folks to come to an IETF meeting.
So yeah, just to add one more thing, the Chatham House rulers, one thing, the other thing we kind of also did is like, we're pretty flexible with the papers itself. So we got like accepted papers we didn't publish, right? Like some people say, hey, I want to submit a position paper, just make sure that it doesn't get published. So it informs the PCE and the discussions we would have, but like nothing further, right? And we're also pretty loose about the listing the affiliation of the people. And there's like people who don't want their identities disclosed, even that you attended. So we were like very flexible about that in the report. I think it really helps a lot. And I think the IAB is uniquely positioned in doing this, right? Because the IETF is like everything about openness, and and this one kind of finds a good balance because everything after this is in the open, right? So we kind of had this like initial like thing to kind of focus on the non-open things that like we couldn't hear otherwise. And then we kind of moved to the open mode now.
One other observation, we really put this together in the space of a few weeks. I mean, it was quite fast. And I think that's a learning as well, that we don't have to have necessarily a huge lead time on these things. I think that added some risk, certainly, but it was successful by some metrics. And we really only started talking about it, I want to say in like late May or so. Yeah.
And July was the real main, IETF was the main thing.
Yeah, that was when we really kicked it off, yeah. Okay, next slide. We have a queue. Can we go to the queue at the end? Is that okay? I think that's okay. Okay. So yeah, we published a blog entry. We have a draft workshop report that we just published the 0 of. I think we're probably going to iterate on that a little bit more, but that kind of has the skeleton of content there that you might be interested in. There's a mailing list that's been around for a little while now, aicontrol@ietf.org, and that's where we're moving all of the conversation over to. So it is now in the open. And we have a side meeting to discuss potential IETF work this Thursday in Wicklow 2I, which I think is just next door, during the lunchtime slot. And so we have some drafts that we're going to discuss and a strawman charter to start discussing. There are some constraints around timing on this because of the regulatory environment. And so we're trying to get some work kicked off relatively aggressively. And maybe even hold, in an ideal world, maybe even hold a meeting before the next IETF in Bangkok. Yeah, so questions?
Hi, Brian Trammell. Thanks a lot for doing this. I just wanted to sort of make an observation that I think the IAB has gone back and forth a little bit on sort of this openness, closeness thing. Thank you very much for taking the courage to do something like this again. I think there's, that pendulum has been swinging back and forth. I think this is a really good way to have this conversation. This might be a question for y'all to think about reflecting on after these next steps, is like maybe make sure that we don't forget how to do the closed to open thing. Because I think that's where we made mistakes in the past, is the closed thing stayed a closed thing. Starting it open means that like you coming up here and saying, hey, we're going to do something quite aggressive. There's no way you can get the workshop done in 2 weeks. There's no way you can get something done before the next IETF meeting if you don't sort of have this way of working where it's on a continuum. So I'd really encourage you to sort of like keep notes and figure out how well this works. And I suspect it's going to work fairly well, and see if we can institutionalize that as a pattern for doing this sort of stuff within the IAB, because this is like super encouraging to see happen. Thanks.
Thank you, and that is absolutely my intention. I really think that this is an opportunity to learn as well as a potential pattern for future use. This is not the only policy issue on the planet right now. So.
So Arnaud Tadei again, and as SG17 chair. So I think it's really good that you are making these workshops. I had a very good first experience of workshop with Bias some time ago. But here I want to make a good segue with the previous topic of liaison. AI is like a wave of 60 meters high that is splashing on everybody at the moment. And I see all the SDOs going headless chicken on that. And I can already see clashes. So we are going to have an overall problem of coordination here. It's already there, if we are honest. So it's just to say that here, what could be very helpful if you would send a liaison to ITUT in particular, because of the AI for Good success that they have, say, we have done that. Because that would help correspondence group on us, so say, oh, maybe we can learn something. And the point to make the link with what Scott explained, in one of the slides of Scott, there is a key point. ITUT countries, member states, make sure they apply no duplication of effort. So if everybody wants to be in a good place, we will be the first one punished before even anyone of you guys. So let's make sure we have enough knowledge between parties so that we can get people do the things they should do and not things that we should not do. That helps. Thank you.
Thanks. No, like I think.
Or no?
I think we will like write something up and send it. So like, what do you think the timing should be? Like, the thing is like really like, we are kind of in the process of chartering a working group. Do you want us to do this after it's done, or like when we have a like fairly stable report, or just say like, hey, we did this and do it? Like, so just think about it. Like, you don't have to answer right now, but like, I think it'll be good for Mark and I to get that info.
Okay, if I may answer, I hate discomfort. So do it when you are comfortable, right? When you feel that there is a moment when you should do it. Just be mindful of a few things. WTSA approved a new resolution on AI. Secondly, the study group starts in January, basically. So you still have some time, but not like an infinite amount of time, right? So if you can get things, let's say, in the first quarter of next year, that would be still very timely, if I can put it this way, unless my colleagues say no.
And yeah, the timing question was top of mind for me as well in terms of, well, we have a draft report available, is that right? Or, there's a charter being considered, or and maybe it's multiple liaisons. So that's something to think about. It is an interesting coordination problem because, industry can wait for the UN level kind of, coordination to happen, but there's already, regulatory requirements from certain jurisdictions, and it's quite chaotic. So I think what's working in our favor here is that we are looking at a very narrow problem in a particular area where we have domain expertise. We're not trying to solve all of AI standardization, and we should run away screaming from any attempt to do so.
I think this is a very good assessment. I have really no issue. And to be fair, I'm speaking because of SG17, but I see the same issues with ISO, with ETSI, and I see already the problems we have there. So just
let's keep the conversation going, it sounds like.
Happy to do so.
Thank you, Scott Mansfield. Because you mentioned governance and policy and things, there are two people that I really appreciate when I'm looking for a contrarian view. One of them is Elliot Lear, but this isn't his expertise. So the other one is, there's a paper by Milton Mueller, a professor at Georgia. And you may have probably already read it, the Rethinking AI Governance paper. If you haven't, read it, please, because I think that does provide a really nice framework of looking at this problem in a different way. So if you're looking for that type of thing, just I would look at people like that are doing work in this area. Thanks.
Milton's great value.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. All right, and now we'll be moving on to our last presentation of the day. Olaf, please tell us, what is the GDC?
Yeah, what is the GDC in 15 minutes? So what I'm going to do is give you a little bit of context for reading the GDC, where we stand as ISOC and perhaps also as a community, what the considerations are at this time, sort of in a perspective of where we stand. I am sort of a member of the team that is doing the work, but I'm not the team member that does the work. And so that also means that I'm not the very deepest of deepest specialist. In our team, we have Mona, Israel, and Tatjana and Carl, who are doing most of the work. Next slide. So what we're talking about today is a document that goes by the name A79L2. This is an RFC number in UN terms. A means that it's basically the General Assembly, a document outcome of the General Assembly. What I did is I did QR codes so that if you feel like that's not a safety issue, you can actually get to that document fairly easy. It is, yeah, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. The purpose is not that you read this, it's just that I can talk about it and you have something to look at this moment. This is a document that was published in September. Let's do the next slide. Because it fits in a history, and I noticed some of the colors went missing on this slide, doesn't really matter. This fits in a history of interest by the UN, by governments in digital or information technology development. That started a long time ago. In the 90s, that interest grew, and by the year 2000, governments said we need to have an opinion about how do we make sure that our policy goals at the global level are being addressed. What can we do to collaborate? Specifically around issues like digital divide and digital development and making sure that bridges are crossed between the global north and the global south. But also, how is this whole digital or information infrastructure, as people called it at that time, how is that governed? And so there were a number of meetings in which the UN thought about, the countries in the UN thought about how is this whole internet thing governed? And at that time, there were two schools, and those two schools essentially still exist today. A rather multilateral approach to internet governance and a multi-stakeholder approach to governance of the internet. In a process that took place between 2001 and 2005, negotiations went on that resulted in so-called Tunis Agenda, the World Summit on the Information Society, that's WSIS, Tunis Agenda. And that document, I'll get back to that language later, sort of crystallizes the consensus around the governance of the internet and the fact that that is being done multilateral. The World Summit of the Information Society doesn't only talk about internet governance, it actually is a sort of an action plan about bridging digital divide, investing, making sure that, you know, a bunch of other things that we're globally interested in. The WSIS came with a process, namely a review process, and it institutionalized a body in the UN where people can come together and discuss information society issues, specifically internet governance issues, and that's the Internet Governance Forum. Fast forward to now, after a review in 2015, we are now in a world that has evolved. In 2005, we barely had IPv6. In 2005, TLS was still on version 1.0. The world has changed. And so has the attention of governments on that world. We now talk about AI and so on and so forth. So governments have much more started to talk about digital cooperation. They start to talk about digital public infrastructure. They are starting to talk about different pieces of the agenda, the digital agenda, in which they need to collaborate and cooperate. And this became a thing on the agenda of the Secretary General. I am not going to describe this whole thing, but there is a Secretary General roadmap for digital cooperation. Then there is a common agenda in which digital cooperation is just one chapter. But that set out sort of the idea of getting to a compact between nations about how to tackle the future. The development of that compact happened between January 2023 and August this year. And basically, in Dutch, we would say daar klap op gegeven. Somebody put down the gavel or during the summit of the future. This is an important document in the sense that it's talking about digital cooperation, how countries think about digital. And the internet, of course, is a part of that digital world. At the same time, in May, we have a process called the WSIS Plus 20, the World Summit of the Information Society Plus 20, which is a review on the consensus and the working of internet governance, among other things. And while the ink on this paper is not dry yet, we're already discussing that next thing. So the context in which this document was developed is important for the consensus around internet governance. So that's the timeline and the context in which this took place. Next slide. So quickly back to that WSIS Tunis agenda that was established in 2005. It's a document, you can read it. It basically confirmed a working definition of internet governance and thereby the role of the technical community. It sort of established that we exist and that our method is a valid method to contribute to the development of the internet. And it also defined the place, the IGF, as a place for coordination between various stakeholders on sort of the high level. And it set out an agenda with a review process on capacity building, building bridges and digital divides. I talked about that. Next slide. The text that defines the internet governance, for if you're interested, is paragraph 34 of the Tunis agenda. This is the secret language. I'm not going to read it out, but that is what we're. That is sort of the place around which we are organized. Next slide. So as I said, the Global Digital Compact was a process to fulfill ambitions of the Secretary General's Common Agenda. And he wanted to have a global compact to connect all people to the internet, including all schools. And the idea about this was basically connecting the digital agenda, looking forward, connecting those to the Sustainable Development Goals. That was the word I was looking for. And so this was basically that compact was designed to connect all people to the internet, avoid internet fragmentation, protect data, for instance, in that context of AI, apply human rights online, introduce accountability criteria for discrimination and misleading content. Well, basically everything that we are talking about in our global debates nowadays. Next slide. So process was set out. This was a UN process led by two countries. Sweden and Rwanda started this, and a little after the start, a few months afterward, Rwanda was replaced by Zambia. This was a multilateral process. So this was a process driven by countries for countries. They tried to involve stakeholders at several stages through consultations. Those were consultations that, for instance, the IETF, the Internet Society made contributions to, and other stakeholders in our environment did too. The first revision was sought by the community. Reversion 2 and reversion 3 were not formally published. That was intransparent. Of course, there were leaked versions of that. And there was actually, quite some concern about this. Internet Society followed this work. What we usually do in these circumstances is what we did with WITSA, with the GDC, which we will do in the WISIS project, is we look at the text, make an analysis, and create a matrix of concerns. And I'll tell you that matrix was pretty full. Next slide. Oh yeah, no, I do want to say something about the concerns. That process was indeed consultation driven. And so it were the nation states, friendly nation states that want a different type of governance of the digital space, basically negotiating in closed rooms. At some point, we were aware as a community, or members of the community became aware of a text of a revision text that really went the wrong way, so to speak. And a bunch of us, me as ex-IAB chair, current IAB chair, not as the IAB, but with that affiliation in the background, send a long letters explaining that the direction in which things went were a bad idea. And some countries have used that in their negotiation. So the output is published. And on face value, this text is not that bad. That's my assessment. Now, what is the process at the moment? We have an outcome document, and the Secretary General has asked for endorsement of the document in two places. First, the vision and the principles of the document, which is Articles 1 to 8, I believe. And then secondly, and that's sort of an and/or, an endorsement of the objectives of this document. And the objectives are, we will bridge the digital divide. We will invest in this. We will do that. Read the document, you'll see that. It's basically Article 10 and onwards. They hope to get a list of endorsers of those principles and vision of the document by December 2024. And based on the input of people who say, we'll pick up this item and we'll work on that, create an implementation map. That process, which is described in the final articles of the document, not completely fleshed out and clear yet. And what I understood was also not a negotiated text. That was sort of a thing that was put in by the UN. Next slide. So this is what I just described. What we believe, and we've vetted this with the UN Secretariat that handles this stuff, is that you can separate this endorsement of the vision and the principles, and you can do that apart from endorsing objectives or saying, I'm going to work on objectives. This is the paragraphs that we have for that. And we are considering whether to endorse the vision and the principles of the compact. And I'm saying this very carefully because we haven't made up our mind. And so have sister organizations are also still looking at whether we will endorse the thing. And that's the reason for that is we have a number of concerns. We do plan to go over the list and at least make an analysis of where we contribute as ISOC to this work. And there are a number of places where our work overlaps with the goals and the objectives of this document. Next slide. There's some general conclusions if we look at this document. On face value, there's general support for the multi-stakeholder governance that remains. And for instance, the text in paragraphs 26 and 27 are basically copies of the WSIS consensus text. So that's nice. If you look at the principles on face value, they're fine, at least to our assessment. The concern was really the process. And this is a reason, and I have made a typo here in the last sentence. Some organization will not endorse, that should be may not endorse. Because I think that some of the organizations in our ecosystem are still, sort of struggling and they have not made up their mind. But the point is, this was not an open process. This was a consultation. We were not part of the decisions. And the question is, by endorsing these principles, which on face value are all very nice, are you also endorsing the process? So other concern that we want to pay attention to, the current WSIS project process lives in Geneva. In Geneva, there somebody made the joke to me oh, how was the joke? I forgot the joke. Well, in Geneva, basically, you have the cooks. You have the people who know what's going on, and in New York, you have the restaurant owners, more or less. That's not the exact quote of the joke, but that's sort of the spirit behind it. And this basically, Geneva has a different focus and a different set of competencies to work with it. The fact that the ITU, for instance, is in Geneva has to do with that fact. The fact that security and international stability negotiations are going on in New York has to do with that different concern and different viewpoint. So this is where we are. As a community, or at least as ISOC, we're trying to figure out how to approach this. That's work in progress. And I think this was where I wanted to be at the end of this thing. I don't think I have another slide. No.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Olaf. So we have 5 minutes left. So I guess, first, if there are any questions for Olaf here about this presentation, please in queue, or if there are any other just kind of open mic questions, we can take those as well.
I'll take this as a vote of confidence, or
if you have questions and feedback on this, please send that to the IAB. You can talk on the architecture discuss, or if you want to just send things directly to the IAB list, and that will involve and be able to be transmitted to ISOC.
Yep. Or directly to
we have
us.
3 people in queue. Great. Carolina.
Hi, Olaf. Thank you for that presentation. Sorry, I'm going to turn on my video. I had a quick question. Rumor in the street was that if you didn't endorse the GDC, you may not be involved in negotiations going forward. I don't know if you've heard the same, and yeah, whether that's sort of a factor for ISOC and others to sort of consider, which speaks also to the point that the process is far from ideal in a nutshell. But I wanted to ask whether you knew anything about that. Thank you.
I don't know if that is a fact, but it's definitely something that goes into the decision if it is a fact.
Very good, thank you. David?
Hi, Lars Lehmann from NetNode. Thank you, Olaf. That was actually very, very valuable, at least for me. I share lots of your concerns that you have expressed here, but I guess you have thought of, but I would like to hear a little more. What do you think the consequences will be if you endorse, and if you don't endorse this document? So what are we looking forward to here? And I understand it's an open-ended question, so if you don't want to answer here and now, that's fine. But it's a question in my mind.
So the big question, of course, is the one that Carolina just asked. If you don't endorse and you're shut out of the process, is that would be a concern? The question is, should you care about that? I think for us, that's perhaps there might be a different answer to that than to other organizations in our community, so to speak. The other thing is, if you don't endorse, does that really, I mean, will people remember that? Do you make a strong statement when you don't endorse? Is the reason for endorsement that you disagree with the principles or just with the process? Can you make that clear in a way that it changes future processes? There's a question mark there. I don't know. As I said, the principles on face value, not unreasonable. And does that mean when you endorse, you have more influence on, for instance, the future of the process? And those are all questions that we are grappling with as well, and we don't have the clear answers. Also, because the modalities that are described in the follow-up processes are just not published yet.
Which is bad. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We have 3 people left in queue. We'll just go through that quickly and trade out. Mark.
Yes, very quick. Thanks for informing us. Simple question. What do you expect from us, IETF community, about this?
I should have expected that question.
Simple question.
It is a simple question. I think that this community needs to make up its mind about the need to engage with these processes. I don't have a strong advice about it. I'm looking at Sally. Maybe you have a strong advice. No, we don't really have a strong advice about it. It's a little bit about being in the tent or being outside of the tent in the follow-up of this structure. I think it's what is in the compact now protects our way of working. And I am actually very happy with that. I think that the points of interactions with this process have been fruitful by members of this community. So in that sense, where we are now, there has not been real damage. Perhaps it's more important to concentrate on the WSIS plus 20 review that is coming our way. But I don't have a clear answer because I don't have a clear answer.
And again, if people have particularly strong opinions or questions, send them.
Yeah.
Like, let's engage there.
Sally Wentworth, Internet Society. Just to build a little bit on what Olaf said in terms of what might come of endorsing this kind of global digital compact and the WSIS plus 20 set forward the digital agenda across the UN system. So different UN agencies that may be working on particular topics are going to be guided by what they see in this agenda and in the compact. And so for an organization like the Internet Society that's active on things like connectivity or other aspects of security and the like, I could imagine that an endorsement would be seen as you'll be participating in future work on these topics. Again, that's not to say this is what we're doing, but it is another factor as we think about what does endorsing mean? Because the further distant we get from right now, when everybody's focused on the process and down the road is something that we have to think about.
All right, thank you. Peter, you have the last word.
Wow, great chance. Thank you, Peter Kordinik. Olaf, during all these consultations and talks and so on and so forth, the coordination of the technical community was a specific issue. I'm not going to say concern. So maybe for the question of endorsement or the strength of the endorsement or conditional endorsement or whatever is in the toolbox, it is probably good to have coherent, if not unified, but at least coherent voices from the technical community. Can you share any insight how that is being worked on without disclosing any secrets?
No, we are talking. It's very simple. We are talking. There's actually a meeting of the what we used to call sort of the I-stars, but IRRs, IAB, IETF, ICANN, and ISOC leadership next week in
Istanbul,
ICANN meeting in Istanbul. I think where the way that I think about this, we don't have to sing in unison. we do have to sing in harmony. That's what my previous boss always said. And I think that's a very good thing. If we give different messages about endorsement, then we really, really have to understand well among each other why we do that and explain it to each other. That is where I stand with this. And we're figuring this out. That's why I say some are considering not to endorse. Some are leaning a little bit more towards endorsing. We are leaning towards endorsement, but that's also because of the follow-up work. Well, I'm saying leaning, but that's still an internal conversation. I saw the fire from my boss. So no, this is an ongoing conversation, and it's indeed that conversation also with other stakeholders in this community that concern is heard. That's the short answer.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And thank you to everyone who came and participated and just listened. I think this has been a educational day and good conversation. So thank you all and see you next time.